Elliot Vanmere had been born into a world of polished marble, gold cufflinks, and whispered expectations. In Boston, the Vanmere name meant everything: old money, old secrets, and the kind of influence that didn't need to shout to be heard. But privilege had come to feel like a prison. Every smile he gave was rehearsed, every handshake calculated. His engagement to Eleanor Wickham, a banker's daughter with a cruel smile and diamond eyes, was meant to unite two dynasties, not two hearts. Then, one evening, he found her not at her piano but in his father's study, lips pressed against another man's, his family's attorney, of all people. The betrayal was bitter, but what broke him was the laughter that followed. She hadn't loved him. She'd pitied him. To her, Elliot was a gentle fool, a decorative ornament in a world built on manipulation. That night, under the glow of the gas lamps, Elliot packed his few belongings and walked out of his inheritance. By morning, the newspapers would call it a scandal. Wealthy heir vanishes before wedding. But Elliot didn't care. He wanted no part of a life that reeked of deceit and debt. His father's business had been failing for years anyway, the fortune long bled dry by greed and speculation. Boston had become a gilded coffin. Then, by chance or fate, he saw the advertisement. It was a simple notice tucked into the back pages of the Boston Sentinel. Wanted, husband for widow ranch owner. Must be of sound mind, steady hand, and honest character. Property in Wyoming Territory. Work hard, earn respect, live free. C.H. At first, Elliot laughed aloud. A mail-order husband? It sounded absurd. But something about those words, live free, tugged at the frayed edges of his heart. Freedom was what he wanted most. Not luxury, not title. Just the chance to begin again somewhere no one knew his name. He replied to the ad the next morning, writing with unsteady hands. I am no stranger to hard work, though I come from a city far from your fields. If you will have me, I would come not for money or comfort, but for purpose. A week later, a letter arrived bearing the faint scent of pine smoke and wax. If you can swing a hammer and keep your word, come west. I do not tolerate lies. Clara Holt, Black Ridge Ranch. That was all she wrote. No pleasantries, no promises. But there was something commanding, almost magnetic, in her bluntness. Elliot sold what little he owned, his father's watch, a trunk of fine clothes, and the last of his savings, and bought a one-way ticket on the Union Pacific line. The train ride west was long and jarring. Each mile carried him farther from the world of velvet and manners, and deeper into a land that smelled of sagebrush and freedom. The landscape changed from bustling towns to endless plains, then to rugged, snow-dusted peaks. He watched the sun sink behind horizons so wide, they made him feel small in the best possible way. He told himself he was ready for anything. But as the train hissed to a stop at the tiny Blackridge station, a scattering of buildings, half swallowed by dust and wind, doubt crept in. What if she was cruel? What if she regretted sending for him? A tall ranch hand with a scarred cheek approached and asked, "You the Boston fella?" When Elliot nodded, the man grinned faintly. "You best brace yourself. The widow don't take kindly to weakness." Elliot adjusted his collar, squared his shoulders, and stepped down into the red Wyoming dirt. The air was sharp and dry, the wind carrying the faint scent of pine and smoke. He didn't know it yet, but that step from polished station, wood to rough earth, would be the first of many into a life darker and more dangerous than he could have. Imagine Clara Holt had buried her husband 2 winters ago, under a frozen sky and the suspicious gaze of the entire Black Ridge Valley. The funeral had been small, hurried. The preacher mumbled his blessings, the townsfolk whispered, and the sheriff stood a few paces back, not out of respect, but caution. Everyone in Blackridge knew Samuel Holt hadn't just disappeared in a mining accident. There'd been no avalanche, no fall. There had been screams, echoes in the night. And when they found what was left of him, or what they thought was him, Clara had already sealed the coffin. Rumor had done the rest. Some said she'd killed him for his land. Others swore she'd made a deal with the devil, or something worse, to keep her ranch thriving while others failed. They called her the Blackridge Widow, a name whispered over saloon tables and in church pews, but Clara didn't care about gossip. She cared about survival. The ranch had been her husband's dream, but it had become her burden. 24 horses, a stretch of hard land scarred by silver veins, and hired men who followed orders but trusted her about as much as they trusted rattlesnakes. She ran it all with precision, rationing supplies, fixing fences, breaking wild mustangs herself when no one else dared. Yet even the toughest soil hides rot beneath the surface. Strange things had begun happening around the ranch after Samuel's death. Cattle found mutilated, their insides hollow as if drained. Tools missing, then reappearing rusted and warped. Horses spooked at night by unseen shapes moving near the canyon edge. Once, Clara had woken to find her barn door wide open, and in the dirt bare footprints, not of man or beast, but something in between. That was when she placed the advertisement. Not for love. Not for comfort. For help. She needed someone who could stand beside her without trembling. Someone she could trust to keep working even when the wind moaned like the dead. The men in town wouldn't come near the ranch anymore, not even for double pay. So she'd written that blunt little note and sent it east, hoping the right kind of fool would answer. And now he had. When Clara saw the Boston man standing at her gate that day, her first thought was that he'd made a mistake. He looked wrong here, too clean, too polite, his clothes pressed despite the long train ride. His eyes, though, there was something wounded behind them. That caught her off guard. She'd expected arrogance or fear, not quiet sadness. "You're early," she said, her voice as cold as the Wyoming wind. "I thought it best to come before the sun set," he replied, glancing toward the horizon where the land dipped into dark canyons. "Good," she said shortly. "You'll need to get used to long hours." She didn't offer her hand. Instead, she led him past the house, toward the barn, the one she kept locked after dusk. There, lying beside the fence line, was the first task she had for him, a coyote, skinned and stiff, its empty eyes staring at the sky. "Something's been doing this," she said. "You'll help me bury it." Elliot hesitated only a moment before rolling up his sleeves. The earth was frozen, the shovel heavy, and Clara said little as they worked. But when he looked up at her, sweat and dirt streaking his face, he noticed her staring not at him. The first night at Blackridge Ranch felt longer than any journey Elliot Van Meer had ever taken. After burying the mutilated coyote with Clara, he'd expected at least a moment of quiet, a cup of coffee, perhaps, or a word of thanks. Instead, she dismissed him with a curt nod and vanished into the ranch house, locking the door behind her. He stood there in the yard, the prairie wind cutting through his borrowed coat, wondering what kind of place he had come to. The other ranch hands didn't help much. They watched him with silent judgment from the bunkhouse porch, their faces shadowed beneath wide-brimmed hats. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with gray whiskers, finally spat into the dirt and said, "You won't last a week." Elliot didn't answer. He'd learned that pride didn't earn respect, work did. When dawn came, the ranch was already alive with sound, horses neighing, gates slamming, the distant creak of the windmill. Clara was everywhere, issuing orders, checking supplies, speaking to the men with the sharp efficiency of someone who'd long since learned not to expect cooperation. She introduced him to the ranches, rhythm like a drill sergeant pointing, commanding, never smiling. "You'll help mend the south fence today," she said. "If the posts aren't set deep enough, the coyotes get through. And if something bigger comes, we'll need more than wire to keep it out." "Something bigger?" Elliot asked. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Wolves," she said after a pause. "Sometimes mountain lions. Don't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answers to." Her tone made the hair on his neck prickle. But he didn't press further. By midday, his hands were blistered and raw from driving stakes into frozen ground. The work was grueling, but he found a strange comfort in it. The rhythm of sweat and effort, the honesty of the task. There was no deception in manual labor. Either the fence stood, or it didn't. Still, unease clung to the air like mist. He noticed it in the horses, restless and skittish, refusing to graze near the edge of the canyon. He noticed it in the silence of the ranch hands, who kept glancing toward the hills as if expecting something to appear. And then there was the barn. It stood at the far end of the property, its doors reinforced with thick iron latches. Clara had told him plainly, no one goes in there after sundown. When he asked why, she just said, "Because I said so," and walked away. That evening, as the sun sank low and the land turned to copper and shadow, Elliot heard it, the sound. Faint at first, like a low hum beneath the wind. Then clearer, rising in pitch until it trembled through the ground under his boots. It wasn't an animal sound. It wasn't wind. It was something deeper, metallic, resonant, almost alive. He followed the sound halfway to the barn before stopping himself. His rational mind scolded him. There had to be a logical explanation. Air moving through the canyon, perhaps, or the windmill echoing across the valley. Yet when he turned, he saw Clara on the porch, watching him. Her face was half lit by lantern glow, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Vanmere," she called softly. "Best come inside. Nights here are unkind to those who wander." He obeyed, though her words lingered long after he'd gone to bed. That night, he lay awake listening. The ranch seemed to breathe around him, the timbers creaking, the horses snorting, the wind whispering through the shutters. Then came another sound, slow, deliberate footsteps outside his window. Too heavy for an animal, too steady for wind. Elliot held his breath, heart pounding. The steps paused, then shifted toward the barn. A latch clinked, followed by a low, guttural sound, half growl, half moan. Then silence. He rose and went to the window. But the yard was empty, the barn dark and still. In the morning, he would tell himself it was just his imagination, the nerves of a newcomer. But deep down, Elliot Vanmere knew something in that barn was waiting, and whatever it was, Clara Holt was hiding it. By the third week, Elliot Vanmere had begun to understand the rhythm of Blackridge Ranch, but not its silences. The days were spent in honest labor, but the nights were ruled by whispers. Something about the land itself seemed restless. The soil near the canyon shimmered faintly at dusk, and when the wind blew from the north, it carried the strange metallic hum that set the horses on edge. The other ranch hands refused to speak of it. Whenever Elliot asked, they found excuses to walk away. It was as though everyone knew a truth he wasn't meant to learn. Clara had softened only slightly toward him. She spoke more than before, though always about work. He found himself admiring her quiet strength, her fierce competence. Yet beneath her calm exterior was tension, like a drawn bowstring. Some nights, when he glimpsed her through the parlor window, she'd be staring at the ridge with a lantern in her hand, her face pale in the light. That night, a storm rolled over the valley, lightning flickering along the distant peaks. Rain lashed the windows and thunder rattled the rafters. The men had long since gone to the bunkhouse, and Clara had retired early. Elliot, restless, stayed up to patch the leaky roof above his small room. He moved the cot aside to reach the boards, but when he knelt to hammer a nail, the floor gave a faint, hollow sound. Curious, He tapped again. There was definitely an empty space below. A hidden compartment. Every instinct told him to leave it alone. But curiosity, his oldest vice, won out. He pried at the edge of the plank until it loosened. Beneath it lay a small leather-bound journal, its cover stiff with age and flecked with dried mud. The initials on the spine made his. Breath catch. S.H. Samuel Holt. The first few pages were filled with the neat, precise script of a man documenting his work. Notes on ore samples, terrain sketches, accounts of progress in the mines near the canyon. But as the pages turned, the handwriting grew unsteady. The words shifted from business to obsession. The silver isn't natural. It breathes. When the pick strikes the vein, the metal bleeds light. Clara says to stop, but she doesn't understand. This is no ordinary find. It hums like a living heart beneath the earth. Last night the light spoke. It showed me shapes' eyes in the dark, faces made of stone. They promised fortune, but they want something in return. Elliot felt a chill crawl up his spine. The entries became more frantic, pages torn, sentences smeared with what looked like rust but might have been blood. It's under the house now. I can feel it watching. If I die, she must keep it fed. The final page ended mid-sentence, the ink scrawled across the paper in a desperate streak. It knows my name. A sudden creak froze him. The door at the end of the hall opened slowly, Mr. Van Meer. Clara's voice was low but sharp. She stood there in her night robe, the lantern trembling faintly in her hand. Her eyes dropped to the journal in his grasp, and her face hardened. "Where did you find that?" "Under the floor," he said quietly. "Why would you hide it?" Her expression flickered between anger and sorrow. "Because some things are better left buried." He wanted to press her, wanted to ask what Samuel had meant, what the silver really was, but she stepped closer and took the book from his hands. "You will never speak of this again," she said, her voice shaking with restrained fury. "Whatever you think you've read, it will do you no good." Samuel was sick. His mind broke before his body did. She turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "If you wish to stay here, you'll follow my—" The storm passed, but its memory lingered like something unsettled had been woken in the soil around Black Ridge Ranch. In the days that followed, Clara spoke little to Elliot. She kept the journal locked away in her study and doubled the chores, perhaps to keep him too exhausted to think. Yet despite her coldness, he noticed small cracks in her armor moments when her hands trembled slightly. When she'd lingered too long staring toward the canyon, Elliot tried to forget what he'd read in Samuel Holt's journal, but the words haunted him. It breathes. It hums like a living heart. What kind of silver vein breathed? What kind of mind drove a man to madness? Still, something unexpected began to take root between him and Clara. It started in silent shared labor, long hours fixing fences and rounding up scattered cattle. There was no flirtation, no easy charm between them. Only the quiet understanding of two people used to disappointment, both carrying secrets heavier than words. One morning, as the sun bled pink across the plains, he found her trying to repair a broken gate. The chain had snapped, and she was struggling to lift the post back into place. Without a word, Elliot stepped beside her and helped brace the beam. Their hands brushed rough, work-worn, not soft like the women he'd known back east. "Thank you," she said quietly, surprise softening her tone. He smiled faintly. "Didn't think you'd accept help." Clara looked at him then, really looked, her guarded eyes studying the man who'd left silk and marble for dirt and danger. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Most men who come here think they can tame it. The land doesn't bow to anyone." "Maybe I'm not here to tame it," Elliot replied. "Maybe I'm here to belong to it." Something flickered in her eyes, a hint of warmth, quickly smothered. She turned back to the gate. "Belonging's a dangerous thing out here." That night, for the first time, Clara joined him and the ranch hands at supper. The men fell silent when she entered, respect tinged with unease. But when Elliot spoke of his failed Boston life with self-deprecating humor, even she allowed a ghost of a smile. Later, when the others retired, Clara lingered by the fire. "You left everything behind," she said. "Most men wouldn't have the courage to do that." Elliot shrugged. "There was nothing worth staying for. And if there's nothing worth staying for here?" He met her gaze. "Then I'll make something worth it." The firelight danced across her face, softening the hard edges. She looked almost vulnerable in that moment, less a legend, more a woman who had lost too much and still kept standing. But their fragile peace was not built to last. The next evening, one of the horses returned from pasture lathered with sweat, its eyes rolling in terror. When Elliot and Clara rode out to investigate, they found the remains of another animal by the ridge, a calf this time, torn open but untouched by scavengers. The ground around it shimmered faintly, as though dusted with silver powder. Clara dismounted, her face pale. "It's starting again," she whispered. "Starting?" Elliot asked. She looked at him as if regretting the words. "Nothing. It's nothing." Then she mounted again and spurred her horse toward home. That night, she didn't appear at supper. The men whispered that she'd gone to the canyon alone with a lantern. Elliot lay awake until moonlight spilled across the floor. Unable to shake the image of her walking into that haunted dark dot at last, he took a lamp and followed. He found her near the canyon edge, standing before a jagged crevice that pulsed faintly with silver light beneath the rocks. She didn't turn when he approached. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice brittle. "Neither should you," he replied softly. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the night wind whipping around them, the earth humming low and alive beneath their feet. Then Clara whispered, "Some things on this land were never meant to be found." And Elliot realized with a chill that whatever she was protecting, it wasn't treasure. It was something that should never have been unearthed at all. The fog came rolling down from the mountains. 3 nights later, thick, colorless, and silent as a gravicloth. Black Ridge Ranch lay swallowed in it, the usual hum of crickets and coyotes, replaced by a muffled stillness that set every creature on edge. Elliot woke to the uneasy whinnying of horses outside. When he stepped onto the porch, he saw lantern light wavering through the mist, someone approaching on horseback. Clara appeared beside him, rifle in hand. "Stay inside," she ordered, but he didn't. Something in her stance, the tightness of her jaw, the tremor in her fingers told him this was no ordinary visitor. The rider emerged slowly from the fog, a thin man in a tattered coat, his hat soaked, his face half hidden by a week's worth of beard. He slid off the horse and raised his hands. "Easy now, Mrs. Holt," he said with a crooked grin. "Didn't mean to scare you none." Clara didn't lower the rifle. "Who are you?" "Name's Caleb Rusk," he said. "Used to work the mines with your husband. Till things went bad." His eyes flicked toward the barn, where the fog swirled thicker, as though drawn to something unseen. "He told me once, if ever I made it back alive, to come find you." Elliot felt the air shift. "You knew Samuel Holt?" Caleb nodded. "Knew him too well. We dug deeper than we should have. Found things in those tunnels that weren't meant for daylight." He took a step closer. "He said the land would eat us if we kept digging. And by God, he was right." Clara's voice was sharp. "Stop talking nonsense and get off my property." But Caleb didn't move. "You think burying the mine fixed it? You think you can feed it just enough blood to keep it sleeping?" "It'll wake again, Clara. It always wakes." Elliot froze. "Feed it?" Clara's expression went rigid, her voice trembling with quiet fury. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do." Caleb's grin was hollow now, his eyes wild. "I saw it move under the ground like molten silver. I heard it whisper. Samuel thought he could control it. You, he pointed a shaking hand at her. You finished what it started. Without warning, Clara fired. The bullet whistled past his ear, burying itself in the dirt at his feet. That's your warning shot, she said coldly. Next one won't miss. Caleb raised his hands again, laughter echoing through the fog. You always did have a steady aim. Guess you'll need it when it comes for him too. He flicked his gaze toward Elliot. It likes newcomers. Fresh souls. They burn bright. That night, the stranger vanished. His horse was found wandering by the creek at dawn, saddle intact, reins dangling loose. There was no sign of Caleb himself. When Elliot told Clara they should send for the sheriff, she refused. The sheriff won't come here, she said. He's as afraid of this land as the rest of them. So we just pretend nothing happened? She turned away, her voice low. You should have listened when I told you not to come here, Mr. Van Meer. This land isn't kind to those who dig too deep. Her words struck him like a confession. That night, while the others slept, Elliot took a lantern and walked toward the barn, the one place forbidden after sundown. The fog still lingered low, and the air around the doors felt colder than the rest of the ranch. He reached for the latch. A faint trail of blood led from the fence to the barn door, half covered by dust. Something heavy had been dragged there. Elliot hesitated, heart pounding. Then he pushed the door open. The lantern light flickered over the floor clean, except for the dark smears that ended at a wooden trapdoor in the corner. From beneath it came a faint, rhythmic sound. A heartbeat. He staggered back, dropping the lantern, and the flame sputtered out. In the pitch dark. The heartbeat grew louder. And from behind him, Clara's voice whispered, barely audible but full of warning and sorrow. Now you've done it. Elliot froze when he heard her voice. For a moment he couldn't see her, only the lantern glow cutting through the dust as Clara stepped into the barn. Rifle in hand, her face pale and drawn. I told you never to come here, she said. Her voice low, almost breaking. I heard something, Elliot replied. Something alive. It's always alive, she whispered. And for the first time he saw fear in her eyes, not of him, but of what lay beneath them. Before he could ask, the trapdoor beneath the dirt gave a slow, rattling thump. Then another. The sound vibrated through the boards, rhythmic, like a massive heartbeat echoing underfoot. Dust drifted from the rafters. Clara, he said, what is that? She didn't answer. Instead, she aimed the rifle at the trapdoor. Get back, she ordered. Now. But Elliot didn't move. He had seen enough secrecy, enough lies. He stepped forward, seized the edge of the trapdoor, and pulled. The stench hit first earth, rust, and something metallic, sharp like blood. The light from his lantern fell down a narrow stairwell, hewn roughly from stone and lined with glimmering veins of silver that pulsed faintly like living veins. Elliot, please, Clara said. If you go down there, you'll never be the same. But curiosity or fate pulled stronger than fear. He descended slowly, the light trembling in his hand. The air grew heavy, almost thick, pressing against his lungs. The tunnel widened at the bottom into a small chamber, and there, chained to the far wall, was what remained of Samuel Holt. He wasn't skeletal. His body looked half-preserved, his skin gray and shining with faint metallic streaks, as though the silver veins had grown through him. His mouth hung open in a silent scream. A pickaxe lay beside him, fused to his hand by metal that had swallowed flesh and bone alike. Elliot staggered backward. My God! Clara's boots clattered on the steps behind him. She stopped when she saw the corpse, or what used to be one. Her face crumpled with grief. I didn't kill him, she said hoarsely. He found the thing under this land, and it took him. He begged me to help him to end it. But when I tried to bury the mine, it wouldn't let me. It's in the ore. It feeds? Feeds? Elliot whispered. On what? On life. The faint light in the walls brightened, pulsing faster now, almost aware of them. The veins of silver throbbed like arteries, their glow reflecting in her tear-streaked eyes. It started with animals, she said. Then it wanted more. Drifters, strangers, anyone the land wouldn't miss. I gave it just enough blood to keep it asleep. I thought she swallowed hard. I thought I could contain it. Elliot felt the ground shift beneath his feet, a low tremor rippling through the chamber. From Samuel's corpse came a faint metallic crackling. His eyes, long dead, gleamed faintly with silver light. Clara, Elliot breathed. We have to leave. Now. But she shook her head, staring at the corpse of her husband. It doesn't let anyone leave. You can run from the ranch, but you'll still hear it. Once you've seen it, you belong to it. As she spoke, a tendril of molten silver began to creep from the wall, winding its way across the floor toward her boot. Elliot lunged forward and grabbed her arm, yanking her back as the silver hissed against the dirt where she had stood. They scrambled up the stairs, slamming the trapdoor shut behind them. Clara dropped the rifle, her hands trembling. It's waking up, she said. The blood I've given isn't enough anymore. Elliot stared at her in disbelief. Then what happens when it's hungry again? Her eyes met his, filled with guilt and terror. Then it takes the one bound to me. He didn't understand at first. Then realization hit like a hammer. The one bound to her, her husband. Her partner, her husband by law, him, outside. The wind rose suddenly, carrying with it the low, metallic hum that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. The horses screamed in their stalls. The very ground beneath the barn shuddered. Clara Holt whispered through clenched teeth. It knows you now. The wind outside had turned savage, howling across the plains like a living thing. Inside the barn, dust sifted from the rafters with every tremor from the earth. The humming beneath their feet had grown louder, steady, hungry, insistent. Elliot gripped the edge of a stall for balance. What does it want from me, Clara? She didn't answer at once. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. Finally, she said the words that made his stomach drop. It wants what it was promised. A life bound to mine. When Samuel died, it took his soul through our marriage bond. Now with you here, it has a new claim. That's madness, Elliot said. You can't bind a man to a curse with a piece of paper. Her gaze was steady. This land doesn't care about paper. It cares about blood and vows. When you stood beside me at that table, when we signed our names, you tied yourself to Blackridge. I thought, God, forgive me. I thought maybe it would leave me alone if I gave it someone new to focus on. But it never wanted you dead, Elliot. It wants you alive long enough to feed. The ground groaned beneath them, and the trapdoor shuddered as if struck from below. A faint crack split the wood, glowing with a silver light that spilled out like liquid fire. Elliot backed away, his mind racing. Then we destroy it. Blow up the mine, the house, whatever it takes. You can't destroy something that isn't fully alive, she said. You can only contain it or feed it. Feed it how? Her voice trembled. With blood. With sacrifice. He stared at her. And that's what you've been doing? Those drifters, those missing men, they weren't accidents? Tears welled in her eyes. You think I wanted to? Every life it took bought me a few more months of peace. A few more months to find a way to stop it. but there is no way. It wants more now stronger blood, closer blood. He took a step closer. Then let it take me. If it ends this, if it spares you, don't you dare, she snapped, her composure breaking. You think I could live with that? After bringing you here, after lying to you? Another tremor shook the barn. The lanterns swayed wildly, their flames sputtering. From beneath the trapdoor came a noise like breathing slow, deep inhalations that seemed to pull the air from their lungs. The horses screamed in panic, slamming against their stalls. Tools clattered to the ground. And then, in the midst of the chaos, the thing spoke, not in words, but in sound metal grinding against stone, a voice that existed somewhere between the physical and the imagined. Clara, she flinched as if struck. Blood trickled from her nose. It's calling me, she whispered. It knows I'm defying it. Elliot caught her arm. We can still run. She shook her head. You can't outrun the earth. It's bound to the land. It moves through the silver like roots through soil. It'll find us anywhere this ore runs. He could see the fight draining from her, replaced by resignation. She walked to the center of the barn and knelt, pressing her palm against the trembling floor. I made a deal once, she said softly. I'll make another now. Before he could stop her, she drew the hunting knife from her belt and cut her palm open. Blood splashed onto the wood, seeping into the cracks. The hum rose to a roar, the silver glow brightening until it painted her face in ghostly light. Take me, she shouted. Take what's left of me, but leave him. The light surged upward like a geyser, engulfing her. Elliot threw up his arm against the brilliance, shouting her name, but she didn't turn. The silver wrapped around her like vines, pulling her slowly downward. Her final words echoed through the shaking barn. Run, Elliot. Don't look back. Then the trapdoor split apart, and both she and the light vanished into the dark. The humming stopped. The earth went still. Elliot staggered outside, the night eerily quiet. The fog had lifted, the stars cold and sharp overhead. For a moment, he thought it was over. Then, faintly, from the ranch was silent. Too silent. Elliot stood in the yard, trembling, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The barn behind him glowed faintly along the seams of its boards, as though the earth itself burned beneath it. Clara Holt was gone, swallowed by the same curse she'd tried to contain. He stumbled backward until he hit the fence, gripping the rail for support. The air smelled of ozone and scorched metal. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to leave Blackridge behind forever, but another part of him, the part that had fallen in love with her quiet courage, couldn't move. She had sacrificed herself for him. He couldn't let it end like that. When dawn broke, the world seemed unnaturally still. The ranch hands were gone, vanished into the night, their bunks empty. The animals refused to leave their pens, eyes rolling white in panic. Elliot wandered through the house in a daze until he reached Clara's study. On her desk lay Samuel Holt's journal, open to a page he hadn't seen before. The handwriting was shaky but clear. If the heart awakens, the fire will starve it. It cannot feed on what is already burning. Beneath it, drawn in smudged charcoal, was a crude map of the canyon. At its center, a mark labeled heart vein. Elliot understood then. The entity wasn't just under the ranch, it had a core, a pulsing source somewhere deep in the canyon. If he could destroy that vein, maybe he could end it. By dusk, he'd gathered what supplies remained. Kerosene, fuse cord, the sticks of dynamite Samuel had hidden in the tool shed. He packed them into a satchel and saddled the one horse that would still go near him. Its ears flicked nervously as the sun bled out behind the hills. As he rode toward the canyon, the ground began to hum again. The deeper he went, the stronger it became, until his bones vibrated with it. The silver veins in the rock shimmered faintly beneath the dust. The entrance to the old mine yawned like a wound in the hillside. Elliot dismounted and lit his lantern, stepping inside. The walls glistened as though sweating light. The deeper he went, the warmer it became, until he could feel the heat through his shirt, and then he heard her voice. "Elliot?" He froze. It came from below, soft and echoing through the tunnels. Clara. He followed the sound down a narrow shaft that ended in a vast chamber, the heart vein. It pulsed in the center of the cavern like molten silver, veins spreading through the rock like roots. Standing before it was Clara, or what remained of her. Her skin shimmered faintly, silver threading through her veins. Her eyes glowed softly, filled with both pain and serenity. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "I couldn't leave you." He said. "It's too late for me," she replied. "It's inside me now. But it's weak. You can end it." He held up the satchel. "With this?" She nodded slowly. "Light it and don't look back. The fire will consume it and me with it." He hesitated, his throat tight. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," she said gently. "I was never meant to live after Samuel. The land chose me to hold it. You were meant to set it free." Tears blurred his vision. "Clara, She stepped closer, pressed a trembling hand to his cheek. Her touch was warm, too warm. "Don't waste it on words," she whispered. "Just promise me you'll live." He couldn't speak, so he nodded. Then he turned, set the charges, and struck the match. The fuse hissed to life as he ran for the mouth of the mine. The ground roared behind him. Fire blossomed in a blinding wave, devouring the silver veins, the walls, the darkness. He stumbled out into the canyon, thrown to the ground by the force of the blast. When the dust settled, the entrance was gone, buried beneath smoking rubble. The humming had stopped, and for the first time since he'd arrived at Blackridge, the land was silent. He stared at the ruins, tears cutting clean lines through the soot on his face. In the glow of the dying firelight, he thought he saw her silhouette one last time standing in the flames, smiling faintly before the wind carried her away. The fire had gone out months ago, but its scent still lived in the soil. Every time the wind shifted, Elliot could smell the ghosts of it, the burned timber, the scorched ore, and beneath it all, the faintest trace of her perfume. Blackridge Ranch was half dead when spring returned. The fences leaned, the fields were streaked with ash, and the barn stood as a skeleton of beams against the horizon. No laughter, no music, no footsteps but his own. Yet Elliot stayed. He woke before dawn each day as Clara once had, lighting the stove with fingers that no longer trembled from the cold. The work was endless, mending roofs, clearing brush, repairing tools warped from heat, but it kept his hands busy and his heart from collapsing under the weight of memory. He told himself he stayed to honor her sacrifice, to keep the land alive. But the truth was simpler and harder. He couldn't leave her behind. The ranch, the air, the silence, every part of it still whispered her name. By midsummer, new grass had begun to creep over the burned earth. The creek ran clear again, and sometimes, when he stood at the water's edge, he caught the shimmer of silver deep in the current. It no longer frightened him. It was as if the land itself was healing, its hunger quieted, its veins purified by the fire. The townsfolk who rode past on supply routes gave him long looks. They whispered that the widow's ghost walked his fields at night, that the Boston man had gone mad talking to the wind. Maybe they were right. He did talk to her sometimes. When dusk fell and the light turned soft and rose-colored, he'd sit on the porch and speak into the silence. "Fence held through the storm," he'd say. "You'd have been proud." Or, quietly, "I think I finally understand what you meant about roots. How they keep growing even after the tree's gone." He never expected an answer, but the air always changed when he spoke her name. Softer somehow. Warmer. One evening, after weeks of rain, he rode out to the canyon. The place where the mine had once breathed silver was now nothing more than a jagged hollow, half filled with wildflowers. Their petals were white shot through with faint metallic veins, glowing when the sunset struck them. He dismounted and walked among them, boots sinking into damp earth. The flowers smelled faintly of sage and smoke. Kneeling, he brushed one with his thumb and felt a tremor not from the ground, but from within himself, something loosening after too long clenched. "I did what you asked," he whispered. "I stayed." A wind rose from the canyon, gentle but sure. It curled around him, tugging lightly at his coat, carrying a whisper that could have been breath, could have been memory. Some things you don't leave behind, it seemed to say. You carry them. When he opened his eyes, the world felt lighter. He rode home beneath a sky streaked with lavender and silver. As darkness settled, he lit the lantern on the porch or lantern and hung it by the door. The flame burned low but steady, its glow stretching across the yard, touching the edge of the rebuilt barn, the new grass, the half-mended fence, inside. He poured a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the light flicker. He thought about Boston, the marble halls, the polished silver, and realized it all felt impossibly distant. He had left wealth behind, but what he had now was something pure, a silence that forgave, a home that no longer needed to hide its ghosts. The wind sighed once more through the rafters. He smiled. Black Ridge Ranch was no longer haunted. It was simply alive, and so was he.